I got drunk and kissed a coworker at the office party. The video reached my husband's group chat. Hi Reddit, this is going to be a really long one, and I'm still trying to even process everything that is happening right now. I'll try to keep this as short as possible, while still giving all the relevant details. I'll also try my best not to use any names at all because I would like to remain anonymous. Plus, I have some mutual friends of my husband and I on my contact list, so, yeah, throwaway account for the above reasons. So, for context, my husband and I have had a good marriage, I think. We almost never fought. Only over trivial things, and it always ended with one of us saying something like, "Let's just drop this," or "What are we doing?" And after that, we never talk about it ever again. For us, silence felt way easier than confrontation. We were comfortable with each other and cared for each other, but over the years, that was really just it. It felt like suddenly the spark just wasn't there anymore. I remember 13 years ago, when we were still so madly in love with each other, and I meant every word of my wedding vows on that day. Almost everyone around us thought we would never end up together because of our religious differences. I won't go deep into that angle because it doesn't exactly have anything to do with this post. But maybe the bid to prove them wrong is what drove us to stay together for as long as 20 years in total. Don't get me wrong, I really cared for my husband. I always have, and I think I always will, but 20 years is a really long time to be with one person. So at some point, everything began to feel stale. I missed the spontaneity, but eventually it felt like steady was the only option I was given, because everything slowly turned into a comfortable pattern. Upon reflection, I believe for as long as 3 years, I had been harboring a feeling of neglect, loss of passion and affection, and even lack of communication from my husband. I realized after so long that I had fallen out of love, and this somehow led to resentment along the line. I was so bored with our lives and the set of routines it had become, but I never truly realized how unhappy I was just then. I considered counseling, date nights, and all the other stuff that could possibly bring a once solid couple back together and deeply in love again, but I dismissed the whole idea of it eventually. Because it looked like I was the only one concerned about our marriage and happiness. But the truth is, I really just wanted things to change. I wanted to travel, to go out for movie dates. I wanted kids I could call my own. But all these stuff are things my husband has always been on the fence about, yet couldn't communicate directly to me. About kids, it had always been an issue even before we got married. I wanted my kids to follow my faith, but he, probably feeling it's his right as the head, wanted them to follow his. But he never explicitly stated so. Whenever I brought up the topic, he'd try to push the whole thing aside by asking why kids had to come into the equation in the first place. But deep inside, I'm sure he wanted kids, but just didn't want to enter an argument with me. Despite all our marital flaws, divorce was never an option. It was like this unspoken rule. But we both just knew that it wasn't in the cards for us. Infidelity, however, was an entirely different case, and probably the only exception. It had always been a deal breaker, way before we even got married. Before we got married, I had only ever been with him. He was my first kiss, sex, and obviously, marriage. The same goes for him. I was his first, and so we had such a clean sheet already, and we spent so much time trying to maintain that we didn't think our feelings or desires would ever change. Now, I look back, and it's funny to me that it was still me who first mentioned that I couldn't stay with someone who cheats no matter what. I straight up told him that if he felt like he didn't love me anymore, or loved someone else better, all he had to do was say the word, and I would let him go. I was so jealous, yet I was the one with all the cheating tendencies. When we started dating at first, we had fights occasionally concerning random guys that I just let in and out of my life as I pleased. I didn't get physical with them or anything, but from a third-party perspective, it looked like I was leading them on. My husband didn't like that, especially since I made such a fuss whenever he spoke about even a past female friend of his. I'm not exactly trying to get all defensive here, but still, in my defense, I made a fuss because I knew he wasn't one to keep female friends at all. But in any case, he had faith that I, myself, would never cheat on him, and that every other man that came into my life had an expiry date, and I didn't engage in any kind of act with them. So, he was all for the no cheating rule. He even used to brag to his friends that even if lived in a house with only one guy that wasn't him, I would never cheat on him with that guy. So I guess I shouldn't even have been that surprised when he showed me the video from the group chat he and his friends shared. I always knew they secretly envied us, and the way my husband always praised me in their presence. I only feel bad that I betrayed my husband's trust, and that they get to make jest of him now. I earlier said I considered couples counseling, but dismissed the idea. The truth is, I couldn't bring myself to tell my husband how I felt, or the real reason I wanted us to go for counseling. So I resigned myself to staying in the marriage as I thought it was good enough already. But around February last year, I met someone at my job. He was new, but somehow he and I clicked instantly. I don't know how best to explain it, but there was an instant attraction and connection. I knew this was wrong, and I've had similar feelings way before my husband and started growing distant, but those were barely crushes. But the thing with this new man felt different and real. But like I said, I knew it wasn't right that I felt this way. So I stepped back and questioned why I felt this way about someone that wasn't my husband in the first place. And when I was done analyzing the whole situation, it dawned on me how unhappy I truly was. But also, the then sensible part of me knew that cheating on a man I had been with for over 2 decades was not the way out. With this resolution, I pushed this coworker of mine away for about 3 months. But it wasn't that easy, considering we worked at the same place. I turned down all his offers to buy me lunch, or give me a lift, or just hang out sometime. I completely shoved him out of my life, in hope that my feelings for him would disappear. But this only made things stronger. I found myself daydreaming about him and the happy life we could share together. But whenever I came back to reality, I was reminded that I had a husband who, whether he showed it or not, really loved me and was with me for as long as I could remember, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, just like he promised. But not even this reminder was enough to bolt my feelings away. During this time, I tried to reconnect with my husband, and this time I didn't just think of doing these things. I actually did them: date nights, movie nights, even more sex, but nothing was working. Sadly, I realized that it may not have just been a phase, and that I might have fallen out of love with this same man whom, as of 2 decades ago, I could swear I couldn't live without. I looked this up to see if it was even possible, and to my amazement, I noticed that it does happen, and a lot. I read a bunch of stories on the internet about spouses that suddenly didn't love their partners anymore, and in some cases the feeling was mutual, which made everything better, and the separation even easier with no hard feelings. I know now, and even then, that the best option is to come out clean to your partner, but I was too scared that I would hurt my husband's feelings, and even mine, and that I might have been wrong. And whatever we were going through was really just a phase, something we'd get through with time, just add a little love and patience. But deep down, I think I knew it was unofficially over for him and I. There wasn't any phase, and time and patience wasn't going to heal anything. It was all bullshit, and I hurt my husband even more by dragging this on for so long. However, there was still an aspect of denial, which, despite all the signs, kept me from believing that my marriage had gone to shit. Over the following months, my feelings for this person grew stronger. And while I pretended I was keeping him away or avoiding him, it wasn't working. And whenever he didn't come to me, I found myself passing by his desk for no reason, just so he could see me and give me that look, even sending him on little errands sometimes, as he was my subordinate. And it's funny because I'm the one who told him I wanted to be just friends, but it was obvious that he wasn't buying that either. Maybe he just stopped trying to be around me so I could realize just how much I wanted to be with him. I don't mean to sound like I'm trying to justify my actions, even though I might be doing that a little bit. But my husband isn't exactly the saint in this story either. He could have done better. Maybe it wouldn't have stopped me from losing feelings, but it could have slowed down the whole process and made me come clean because of the overwhelming guilt I would have been feeling due to the efforts he was putting in. But he didn't do anything either. The lack of communication was becoming so bad that we never even fought at all. And I'm not trying to exaggerate it. We literally appeared like the most peaceful, probably most sound couple to whomever was watching us from the outside. His friends thought I was the best, and most perfect wife ever. My friends thought he was the most adorable and perfect man for me. They all thought they had a perfect marriage like ours, and complained about the fights they had with their own partners, and how they wished their partners could be as mature as my husband and I. I only ever smiled when they said stuff like that, but if only they knew. Praises from outsiders like them about how stable my marriage was were probably one of the reasons I was scared of opening up to my husband about how I felt. I was so blinded by the fantasy of what we appeared to be that I discarded even the slightest thoughts of what our current situation could lead to. I used the growing feelings between my affair partner and also the attraction I felt towards him to compensate for the lack of love I felt for my actual husband. But deep inside, I knew this was wrong. Thankfully, nothing inappropriate happened between us. Not then, at least. But it was obvious that I was already cheating emotionally, and in my imaginations too. I felt guilty enough for that, and despite the fact that feelings kept growing on both sides, my affair partner and I never did as much as even discuss these feelings, not to talk more of acting on them, so nothing happened in that aspect, but the whole thing still had an effect on my marriage. My husband was never one to pay attention to detail, but I dissociated from my marriage completely, and started resenting my husband even more for failing to make me happy, and at the same time, somehow preventing me from being happy outside our marriage. At this point, I started to see him merely as a roommate. We hardly had sex, and even when we did, I think for me it was due to some sense of duty towards him, and not necessarily because I loved him or wanted to get laid by him. What pissed me off the most was the fact that he didn't seem to notice any of this, to notice how much I had stopped trying, that the same me who used to complain so much some years back rarely saw anything wrong with what he did anymore, or that the chatty girl he had met decades ago was not so chatty anymore, not even to him. In fact, right now, I think it's only fair if I say I cheated and maybe I feel bad, but so what? That's on him too. You can't solely blame me for falling into the arms of another man who had my time and gave me attention when my husband was too busy with heaven knows what. The relationship with my affair partner developed sometime this year. We met up more often, went on dates, did everything solid couples did except get physical. But would you believe that throughout all of this, my husband never noticed a thing? Or who knows? Maybe he did notice but didn't just care because it hadn't gotten out yet. Because I don't think a man who cared enough would say nothing, not even do as much as look up when his wife of so many years dresses up and simply tells him she'll be back when it's already dark outside. Eventually, I stopped caring about my husband or what he thought, or the guilt I was supposed to be feeling, and after some consideration, my affair partner and I started a physical relationship. And I'm not even kidding when I say those times were the best I'd had in years. I looked forward to the sex, the caresses, the random kisses, the surprises, everything. I was undeniably in love with and attracted to this person, and he made me fall even deeper as the months passed by. But we were just so stupid and careless and lost in ourselves that before I knew it or could process what I was doing, I fell pregnant to my affair partner. Like instantly. I absolutely lost it. I freaked out, went into shock and denial, and back. I didn't know what to do, nor tell my husband, or whether to even tell him anything at all. I knew if I didn't tell him, the presence of the baby would constantly remind me of the cheat and reckless person I had become. But if I told him, I would ruin what we had built for so many years. I was torn between the two choices, and there was literally no good way out for me, not any that I could see at least. Every option at the time automatically felt like a mistake, but I had to do something. My husband knew I was pregnant, and so did my affair partner. And my husband also thought the child was his, but the idea of having a baby didn't exactly delight him. When I told him about the pregnancy, he didn't let out a shout of joy or that of frustration. He was just in between, if that makes sense. His face was expressionless, and then he said something in the lines of, "Oh, wow." And that was it. He never offered to take me to any doctor appointments. Basically, he did nothing. Just acted like nothing had changed, and I wasn't carrying an entire human being or soon to be in my belly. This entire time, my affair partner was encouraging me to come clean to my husband. He said it was the perfect time, and now I absolutely had to. Yet, I shut down. When I said I couldn't process anything that was happening in my life anymore, I meant it. I couldn't even function well at work. Luckily, I hadn't taken my annual leave just yet. So around 2 months after I took in, I did. And almost immediately, I made the decision to terminate the pregnancy at 9 weeks. Not even the decision to terminate the pregnancy moved my husband. He was cool with it, but still as unsupportive as before. By this time, I knew he was definitely no longer the man I once married, because that man was the most loving and caring person I knew. My affair partner was with me even through the terminating process. He offered me the emotional support I desperately needed. Yet, the act of terminating and not telling my husband the truth completely destroyed me, because for one, despite the circumstance, I loved my unborn baby so much, more than anyone else in the world. Every part of me was telling me not to do it, but I felt like it was the best choice in an impossible situation such as the one I had gotten myself into. By this time, I had completely shut my husband out. I secretly blamed him for the loss of my unborn child and everything I was going through. I returned to work, and somehow, my company thought it a great idea to introduce a non-fraternization policy due to an instance between a supervisor and his subordinate, which I would rather not talk about, since it doesn't exactly concern this post. But they were nice enough to include that people who were already dating could check in with the HR and have this documented so it doesn't cause issues for them in the future. My affair partner was literally begging me to make the decision and come clean to my husband and everyone, because it was so obvious I wasn't the slightest bit into him anymore. But that was the last thing I wanted to think about. I was trying to get my husband out of my mind and live as though he didn't exist entirely, but divorce was the last thing I wanted. I didn't pay attention to what my affair partner was suggesting and went on with my life and the affair. My AP became my coping mechanism. I literally relied on him, and most especially on the sex we had, to cope with stress and the post-traumatic phase of losing my baby. I didn't realize it then, but it was quite unfair of me. I was being totally selfish and inconsiderate of his feelings, and of my husband's, if he had any. Then came the event that ruined everything. I had worked hard all year, hoping that eventually my hard work would be rewarded, and I had it in mind that even though the rest of my life was going to shit, work was the only thing I thought I had under control, and the office party that weekend was one I had been looking forward to for a long time. I told my affair partner not to act so close to me during the event, especially before they presented the awards, so that it didn't jeopardize any chances I may have had. But now that I think about it, that was just silly. A few minutes just before the presentations wouldn't have changed a thing. And guess who didn't get selected Team Leader of the Year, despite all her achievements and hard work that year? That's right, me. I was so pissed that someone who didn't even work half as hard as I did, and achieved as much as I did despite my 2 weeks leave later on, got the recognition I deserved. My affair partner saw the frustration in my eyes and kept trying to cheer me up with stuff like, "It's just an award, better luck next time," and just very pitiful stuff. I got mad and yelled at him to stay away from me and even blamed him for the award I didn't get. He may have been on 1 or 2 of the teams I had led while working on some projects that year, and a part of me thought the company may have suspected some kind of favoritism during that and decided that it overshadowed my achievements, or that some coworker suspected us and leaked information. Well, I wasn't completely wrong. My affair partner went away like I asked, and left with no one else to pour my frustration on. I drank to stupor. And after this, I found myself crying in a corner. I felt so lonely and abandoned and unloved, like I felt so many mixed emotions all at the same time. My husband didn't value me. My company seemed to not appreciate me too, and all I was left with was my affair partner, who deep inside probably couldn't stand me either. I had become a shell of the woman I once was. In fact, I was supposed to invite my husband to the party, but I didn't see the point. Because even if I got an award, his contribution to it was definitely negative. Realizing that my affair partner was truly the only one left for me to run to, I wiped my tears and staggered with a bottle of a wine in my hand, looking for him. When I finally found him, I inspected him for a moment. He was a humble man, and a good one too. He deserved the best. In my drunken state, I decided I would come clean to my husband the moment I got sober, so we would go to HR and make us official first thing Monday morning. The lies we tell ourselves. Heaven knows I wasn't close to even being really to tell my husband anything about my affair, And the thing with HR, I don't know how my sick brain planned on handling it if I kissed my affair partner in front of everyone before reporting to HR days later. I think my subconscious was just looking for a way to excuse what I was about to do, and in the open, where almost everyone could see, I kissed my affair partner that night. Maybe a brief kiss wouldn't have been so bad. But the fact that he didn't push me away despite being shocked, and instead relaxed his bones and leaned into the kiss himself before realizing it, made it worse. If the company or our coworkers had suspicions, well, that definitely confirmed it all. And some idiot who, unknown to me, probably envied me and my marriage and was maybe a friend or girlfriend to one of my husband's friends, I don't know, thought it funny to send a video of me kissing another guy to one of my husband's friends. I don't know if that even makes any sense. But yeah, by assumption, that's what I would say happened. Because no one cared to tell me how that got to his group chat. I didn't go home that night. I stayed over at my affair partner's apartment. That was the first time I was sleeping over at his place. That night, I promised him that I'd break things up with my husband for good, and we could become official. He smiled like I had just made him the happiest man in the world. We had good sex, and sleep was great. But the next day, I got up early and got dressed to go back home to my husband. When he opened his eyes and noticed I was leaving already, he asked what the rush was. I said I had to go home because I didn't inform my husband I would be sleeping out. And in all 13 years of my marriage, I hadn't slept outside my marital home without him. My affair partner smiled and said it wouldn't matter since I was getting a divorce anyway. I was caught off guard, and for a moment I became confused. Divorce? I asked him. Then he reminded me of what I said the night prior. I found the thought of me saying something like that so funny that I mistakenly chuckled out loud. I had to sit down for like 5 more minutes and explain to him that despite the fact that I really loved him and my whole body ached for him, I didn't exactly see myself leaving my husband anytime soon. I didn't know life without my husband. Being with him and being his was all I knew, and as much as it still hurts, that's why I had to terminate the pregnancy. I chose him and our steady marriage over the beautiful baby boy or girl I would have still had right now. My affair partner was not happy with all I had to say. I'm sure he felt used and unvalued, and I didn't know how to explain to him that that was not the case, and that he really meant a lot to me. He told me if I was not ready for something more stable between the both of us, then I should count him out because he was tired of being played around with. I understood his frustration, but there was really nothing I could do about it. Leaving the already steady marriage I had where bills were paid on time by my husband and everything else taken care of for someone who didn't exactly have his life figured out yet and was receiving a salary way less than mine didn't seem like a wise thing to do. So I opted to save my marriage in the hope that it wasn't too late. On my way home, I kept thinking about what to say to HR concerning the previous night, if I ever got called in, but at the time, that was the least of my problems. I just wanted to save my marriage at all cost, even if it meant resigning from my workplace so news didn't get to my husband about my affair. But the worst had happened. It was too late. When I got home, my husband was waiting for me on the porch. He usually went to the gym on Saturday mornings, so I was surprised to see him in a chair reading a newspaper like it was a Sunday. But I was determined to change things for the better. So instead of saying the usual hi and walking away, I leaned over and kissed him. Even the gesture felt weird. It's something I hadn't done in a really long time, and I didn't feel anything inside as I did it. No sexual activation, no sudden love, just numb. And my husband didn't react either. If anything, it was as if he couldn't wait for me to get off his face. When I stood erect and examined him, wondering what I should do next, he dropped his newspaper, picked up his phone, entered his WhatsApp, and showed me a video from the group chat he shared with his friends. It was me and my affair partner nearly swallowing each other up as we kissed at the party. For a very brief moment, I felt disgusted by myself and started coming up with so many excuses in my head. I went out of the video and scrolled down the chat and read the disgusting comments his friends left. They mocked him, said they knew I had been too good to be true, and that our perfect relationship seemed almost too perfect. One said he knew I had that whoring spirit in me, and it was only about time I showed it to the world. This may sound selfish, but it felt kind of unfair. I cheated once, and suddenly I have a whoring spirit. That's an unfair thing to say to someone who, despite all the odds, had been faithful for close to 2 decades. One slip, and I'm suddenly a monster or a wolf in sheepskin. And no one cares to know or think of what could have made me cheat. Of the things my husband may or may not have done to drive me to have an affair for close to a year. I tried to come clean to my husband at that moment. He didn't ask, but I told him anyway. I told him everything I had been feeling for the moment I felt I didn't love him or us anymore, the first time I slept with my affair partner. I told him about the baby and why I terminated the pregnancy and how depressed I felt after that, and how bad I felt that he wasn't supportive during that time, and how I used my affair partner to cope with the stress and trauma I was feeling during that time. But I also told him that I ended everything with him that morning because I wanted our marriage to work out, and I was determined to fix whatever was wrong with it. I didn't realize it at first, but by the time I was done with the whole narration, the top part of my dress was drenched in tears. All the while I spoke, my teary eyes didn't catch my husband moving closer to console me or anything. If anything, he was on his phone most of the time. I had to get down on my knees and beg him, ask him for forgiveness, tell him we could start all over again, go back to how we were some years ago, and pretend none of this ever happened. But the moment I finished, he went inside, just behind the door, and started bringing out my stuff. I stood frozen, and before I could realize what was happening, he had all my stuff outside. I grabbed his leg and begged him while he moved the things to my trunk, but he moved like there wasn't a human being at his feet. And once he was finished, he went inside and shut the door on me. I sat in my car and cried most of the day. I eventually slept off after, and by the time I woke up, it was evening. My husband's car was gone and the door locked. He didn't care that I was alone and asleep in mine and just went out, leaving me there. Left with nowhere else to go, I went back to my affair partner's apartment. He opened the door to me, saw how tired I looked, and the bag of belongings beside me, probably guessed what had happened, but shut the door on me anyway. By this time, I was too tired to even beg or protest. I quietly went back to my car and drove to the nearest hotel I could find. I ordered pizza that night and ate all by myself. I turned off my phone and slept the whole of Sunday contemplating what to do if someone reported me to HR on Monday. I was almost certain someone would, but I didn't have the slightest idea that it would be my husband. He had always been a man of action, but I never knew how far he could really go with it. Monday morning, I turned on my phone and I started receiving messages from family friends, almost everyone I knew in my life. But those were really the least of my concerns. What really caught my eye was the email I got from HR with a very short video of me and my coworker kissing attached to it, and a brief voice recording of me confessing to sleeping with my coworker, also attached. The video and voice recording were so accurate and straight to the point that I knew it had to be my husband. The memo claimed they were going to do a thorough investigation and all, but I know the evidence is already clear and there's nothing to investigate. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, or how I'd get another job, because it took a while to get this one. I feel even worse for my affair partner because it feels like I wronged him somehow. It's been nearly 2 weeks now, and I'm expecting feedback from the HR department by the end of this week. I know what the final decision is going to be, but for some reason I'm still scared. Fear of the unknown, perhaps? I really don't know. Last I heard, my affair partner moved back to his hometown. He probably knows as much as I do that we've most likely lost our jobs for good. My husband sent the video and recording to everyone I know. Now they're all looking at me like I'm some kind of prostitute, and he's filed for a divorce already. I don't even have any energy to fight it, and on what grounds could I, even if I wanted to? I've been seeing a therapist lately because of nightmares I've been having, and the loneliness that is almost taking my life since no one wants to associate with me anymore. Putting this out there may or may not have been her idea, and I know most of you going through this post already hate me by now, but I hope my story helps someone out there. If I were to go back in time and do one thing right, it would be to come clean and tell my husband straight up that I was not feeling our marriage anymore, because I know it's one of two things, but he likely felt the same. But our lack of communication has cost me a bond and friendship I can never get back. It's too late now. Telling him didn't make a difference, and I'm left with bits and pieces of my life to pick up from.